welcome to this event on the Regime0 here. We're very enthusiastic about this here. We're very happy to have you here, even on a very difficult time of the year. But I think it's really very important that we have this event here and that we have a concrete proposal on this regime that we want to present and launch today here. I want to start first of all by motivating why it's important that we have this event and why you are here. We all know that we need much more productivity growth for the EU economy. We know that innovation is a very important driver of growth. We know also the typical problems that the European innovation system has, particularly compared to the US and China. And that particularly the problem is in two elements. First of all, it's in the business R&D here. So not so much the generation of great science here, but how to translate and bring that into markets here. So that's the typical problem we have in Europe. So it's in motivating that business R&D here. And a lot of these new ideas actually come from new companies that have these great ideas here, willing to exploit them here. And it's this Schumpeterian creative destruction element that we are missing here, these new companies that can actually become sufficiently scaled so that they can either take up these commercial ideas or at least challenge also the incumbent players here to be more innovative here. And compared to the US and China, that's exactly this kind of Schumpeterian growth dynamics that we are missing. And this is why we need these new companies that can actually very quick, with the ambition, with their innovative ideas to really operate globally on a global scale here, and being able to do that sufficiently fast here. So what we want to do then here with this regime is trying to eliminate the barriers for these companies here to grow to critical scale so they can really play their role in these growth dynamics. Of course, that will not be sufficient. We need also other elements of the system here, but it's a very necessary element in the system here. So that's why I think this Regime0, it's a very important component of the overall policy mix. We definitely want to also, in order to ensure that it will actually be something that will actually move forward in the political constituency, we also want to really focus on particularly these entrepreneurs, which are really very pivotal, and the barriers that they are really facing. Yeah, thanks. And so that's why we also started off with identifying who are these companies and then what are the typical barriers that they are facing here. And then we focus our proposal actually on particularly those barriers and being very targeted here. The purpose of this panel is then, first of all, to present our proposal here. Basic lines on that, and that's my colleague Fiona Morton who will be doing this. You all know her. She's a senior fellow at Veugelers, but also at Yale here. We had a lot of fun identifying what we needed to write there, so we hope that fun will also be able to translate to you here. But then, of course, the importance is also to have a look at what our proposal, how this is actually being received in the society here. For that, we start actually with the real field here on what we are addressing here. So we will first have Morton, which is an entrepreneur. It's really a prototype of the type of entrepreneur that we are focusing on. So we're very happy that he was able to dedicate some of his very important and scarce time to be here. He's a co-founder of Probiotic, which is a microbiology biotech pioneer. So he pioneers probiotics, definitely a good example of the potential for fast growth, the need for EU scale to provide that fast growth here. So he's really the prototype of entrepreneur that we want this regime to work for. So his feedback on is this what you would need actually is very important here. And then we move to another part of the real scene, which is Robin Wouters. He has a long history in media and events entrepreneurship here. also an editor of tech communication here. But the reason why we have you here is also because you've been advising very widely startup and scale-up networks, angel investments here. So it's also from the investment side that we will be looking at. Then we move to Amaryllis Verhoeven. So we have really a splendid panel here today. Amaryllis Verhoeven is the head of unit of the digital transformation of industry at DG Growth here. She has a law background, but also a lot of experience on EU policy making, both in terms of digitalization, single market, industrial policy here, and also a lot of experience on how EU governance takes place, what works, what doesn't work here. So she can predict very well whether our proposal will hold or not. And then we finally close with Antonio Garcia del Riego. He's here as a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. He follows the internal market, economic monetary union and social cohesion within that committee here. So he represents the views of the EU society at large here, but he also has a history in the financial sector, and he can also bring that perspective in terms of the financial provision of capital for startups here. So I hope you agree we have really a splendid panel here. So it's a good idea of you to spend your precious time here in this panel here. So I give the floor to Fiona for
Thank you, Reinhilde. All right, let me tell you a little bit about what we are proposing. So first, this regime is an EU-wide incorporation regime for startups. It is not for large existing corporations. It's not for any really existing corporation. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of dispute over what if you allowed an EU-wide regime for existing firms, there would be forum shopping, there would be harm to labor, and so on. We don't want to get involved in that. And so we would like to limit this proposal to startups. A second reason that by limiting to startups, it should help with acceptance of the proposal and enthusiasm for the proposal is this is focused on firms that do not exist today. If we have this easier way to incorporate Europe-wide, it will cause firms to exist that currently just don't get founded because it's too much trouble, it's too difficult for a scientist to found a company, or those companies go to the United States. So what we are attempting to do is create more GDP, more innovation, more growth in Europe that simply does not exist already, rather than convert one type of firm to another. Okay. So these are startups, and they have to have growth plans. So we are not thinking about a cafe in Brussels. We are thinking about probiotic, biotech, digital, defense, firms that are naturally selling across many countries. And so to get into the regime, the founders have to demonstrate credible innovation and growth plans. What does that mean? It could be just simply you are selling a biotech drug. Obviously, this is consumed by people outside of the nation in which you are located because everyone's bodies are the same. Okay, so there will be some flexible requirements there. And then the incorporation will be a one-stop digital registry, rather like the Estonians have, fast, remote. If your pitch deck or your business plan shows your innovation, then you are going to be approved in a very quick time frame. Okay, and then that corporation becomes legally recognized across all EU member states. What's involved in Regime0? It's a simple corporate governance and liability rules, so those can be easily looked up and well understood, and designed for venture capital to be easy and familiar, and for the entrepreneur to be easy. Risk capital acquisition, it will be streamlined because the corporation is legal across all member states. The corporate governance and liability is well understood. The standard contracts are hosted in the hub. So the hub where it's registered also has all the templates for necessary contracts to attract capital. So lower barriers to entry for the capital, higher payoffs for the capital, we will attract more capital. Labor. Founders and key employees with a material equity stake in the firm will have a simple labor regulation specific to Regime0. So these employees will not be subject to the labor regulations of their home member states because they are basically the founders, and if the company is successful, they will be very wealthy. So these are not regular workers. They have significant material and material equity stakes. Regular employees are just do the same thing they've always done. Everybody else, aside from these key employees, is not having any change in labor laws or labor regulations. Taxes on equity compensation, believe it or not, there are member states who tax equity compensation at its grant. Okay, and if you have a very fast-growing startup at its grant, the equity's worth basically nothing, except that you hope it's worth really a lot later. So this is not a very sensible approach because it does not yield much tax revenue, and it also discourages the creation of the company. So the important thing about Regime0 is equity compensation is taxed at exit, at sale, with a mandatory holding period. The tax rate is, of course, the member state's decision as usual. There will be built-in competition in this regime because the hub is going to host up-to-date labor regulations and tax rules for each member state. That means that if you are Morton and you're sitting in Luxembourg and you're thinking about where to put your manufacturing facility, you can compare what the rules are in Estonia, France, Italy, Portugal, Luxembourg, Belgium, and therefore the startups can put their activities and their people in the member states that they think are most appropriate. If EU member states want to design special tax regimes or labor incentives to attract these quick-growing startups, they're welcome to do that, of course, and that they just have to put what is applicable to Regime0 into the hub so that the entrepreneurs can easily find it and compare and contrast. Okay. That's the wrong, I'm sorry, the title is wrong on this slide. It should just say bankruptcy, or exit, really. Exit rules are, we have two special ones. One is for bankruptcy, which it will be quicker because we have specialized courts and efficient, and also is going to mandate that entrepreneurs and founders who follow all the rules of the bankruptcy court may not be otherwise penalized in terms of their credit rating and their ability to start a new company. So, of course, if you are not following the rules, that's different. But if you are doing everything the way you're supposed to do and it's just your startup failed, your home member state may not prevent you from starting again or penalize you in another way. If your firm is successful enough to be purchased by another entity, and that is your exit route, that merger will be reviewed by the European Commission, not a national competition authority. And this will help with uniformity and simplicity. The European Commission will have a time limit on how long it can take for that review, and that will give it jurisdiction over killer acquisitions. EU countries, therefore, must treat Regime0 firms equivalently to domestic firms. There will be no discrimination in areas like licensing, public procurement, subsidies. There will be alternative dispute resolution run by the hub, but there will be specialized courts like we have for the unitary patent that are in member states that will handle disputes if they cannot be managed with alternative dispute resolution. And finally, a very important point, the implementation of this Regime0 is really necessary through a regulation rather than a directive. And the reason is that if you use a directive, then every member state gets to have a little variation on the main idea, and that immediately removes the benefit of this regime, which is designed to be incorporate once and then you're just ready to go in every member state. So we cannot, any solution that lets member states vary what they are doing will destroy the whole point of this. And so that's just really critical to keep in mind. Okay, and that is a quick overview. And now we are looking forward to reactions of the boots on the ground.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Fiona. You managed to really give the main points of this, but of course there are many different details which will be also able to read in the policy brief that will come out here. So indeed, we're very much looking forward to your comments here. And the first word is from Martin. Is this something that would help you, that you would like at the time when you were starting here? So do you think it's really well targeted to guys like you?
Thank you for giving me the speech. What I would like to say is that indeed, I mean, I founded my company when I was 29 or something, yeah, and now I'm 10 years later, so almost 40. And back then, indeed, I was looking, was young, I could go wherever I wanted, although I am an Eastern European Belgian, and it's important to say, from the small community. And I was looking at, okay, where do I go? Yeah. And I founded my startup in the Netherlands, near Eindhoven, because there was the university and biotechnology specialists, okay? And at some point, when you are founding a company, you look at funds, yeah? You need money to basically expand and to grow, well knowing that I am not a biotechnologist, I'm an IT specialist, and I worked in IT for 10 years, or 9 years more or less. Even when I founded the company, though. And I moved into a complete other field with my father, actually. So it's a father and son journey. So that's why I'm a co-founder. And then I went to the Netherlands without knowing any rules. But what I saw is that, a lot of bureaucracy to create a BV, or like Société Anonyme in the Netherlands. And then opening a bank account was also kind of complex. But I figured out in Luxembourg it's way more complex to open a bank account. It's a paradox, yeah. But anyway, what I saw back then is that I needed to go through a lot of processes, and I didn't know anything about it, yeah. And then ultimately I succeeded. And to get the funds, I basically described the project, and I sent to the ministries of economy of Belgium, the Netherlands, and in Luxembourg, the project. It was a copy-paste, basically, with a business plan, and I was looking at, okay, who would basically support biotechnological companies? And actually, the good news back then was all three. They said, we will give you funds. Now comes the catch, yeah? I am a European, first of all. I feel like a European. But every country said, if we invest in you with national funds, you come to our country, you develop our country, and you stay after the research program. So basically, when you get the funds, you stay a couple of years here, you register the IP here, everything here, yeah? And if you already have something in the Netherlands, though, close it. And this is reality, okay? So then I felt like, okay, yeah, I'm a young guy. I do whatever people tell me to do because I was not that mature. But I was thinking now when we talk about it, I'm like, okay, what is Europe here? Yeah. So okay, so I need to do the bureaucracy again, yeah, because Luxembourg was the one that was the most generous. I need to be very frank here in terms of subsidies and in time. They wanted to get out of the financial part and invest in biotech. So I decided to go to Luxembourg. I was free to do so. But then I needed to close the Netherlands, yeah, open in Luxembourg, and it was again a period of 3 months, 4 months of bureaucracy. And if I had the chance to go through a regime that would be European-wide, I would say, why not? I would pick it, yeah. And I need to make this clear, yeah. I needed funds back then to hire people to do the job because an IT specialist cannot do biotech. And that was my main priority. I was not looking at, tax advantages or, or clusters where I could make connections because Luxembourg is not really known back then in biotech, yeah? The Netherlands more, though. So, yeah, I mean, this, in a nutshell, I would say this was, let's say, back then, the biggest challenge. And I was surprised to see that basically the national ministries of economies were pushing me to basically, I can understand it to a certain degree when they give money to create jobs there, but then, I had this bureaucracy of closing, opening, and et cetera, and I need to focus on something else, right? That's my main comment. And then, of course, now to go back to talent and getting talents, You know that within Europe we have multiple biotech clusters, indeed. I have the chance, I think in Luxembourg, that near the university we have a cluster that is functioning, and I can hire people. But the people are not necessarily people from the European Union, so they come from outside the European Union, so I have to go through, visa and all this stuff. I would say it's time-consuming, but functioning. So I'm not criticizing, I'm not here to criticize anything, but that's also something I believe that many startups are going through as well, especially if you need the specific talent, Okay.
Thanks a lot. You very nicely, although we didn't know in advance, but you very nicely illustrated what we typically find also as the key barriers for guys like you, which is navigating all the different rules and regulations here, getting access to risk capital and getting access to key personnel. So this is also why we focus particularly on these issues here. But you also already identified the importance of access to capital here. And so what we're also hoping is that our proposal will actually make it easier also to motivate the capital part of the story here. And that's why we would like to hear your story. And maybe we should also get a hat for with Regime0, yes.
Thank you for the invitation, first and foremost. Martin, thank you for the testimonial. It's funny because... Hello, yes. So I've been doing this for about 20 years now, covering the European startup ecosystem, talking to entrepreneurs, and the stories are almost always the same, right? We almost force entrepreneurs in Europe to play in hard mode, to do like a video gaming reference. We put up all of these barriers for them just to start and to raise cross-border investment without even talking about building and scaling and hiring talent and exiting at the end of the journey. Well, not the end, but so every initiative and any project and any movement that wants to stimulate innovation and growth and bring us up to speed and scale with other countries in the world is welcome. Now, as you can tell from the hat that I'm wearing, I'm part of a movement called EU Inc., which essentially has the same motivation as Regime0. So in that sense, it's quite similar in what we're trying to achieve. I think the main difference is that we actually went out and talked to entrepreneurs like yourselves. So we did about 22,000 signatories for the petition. So we've talked to thousands and thousands of associations, entrepreneurs, investors, and helped co-create the EU proposal that's been in the making for about 14 months now. So this was a co-creation, so it's more like a bottoms-up approach than I think the Regime0, but the objective is the same. Like, how do you stimulate entrepreneurship? How do you stimulate growth? How do you stimulate cross-border investment? Which you might think we have a European startup ecosystem, but the reality is we have a very, very fragmented ecosystem that's made up of smaller startup ecosystems. I think the number is about 18% of all investments are done cross-border, which means that more than 80% of investments in startups are domestic, right? It's local investors investing in local startups. For the investors, that's great. It's less competition, right? You get to choose the winners and you pick the best ones. For the startups, it's awful because you cannot choose the best investor. And the reason that we don't have these cross-border investments so much is because we lack standards. We always say like standard, speed, scale. We know we lack the first two ones. There's less more of a realization that we lack the standards. We don't have a Delaware Inc. that a startup can turn to and within a day set up a company, raise investment, it's affordable, it's cheap. Everybody knows it, everybody understands it. That's what makes it a standard. So we went out and asked, like, if you would create something like this in Europe, what would it look like? And that's why we put together the proposal, also in conjunction with law firms, member states, with the Commission itself, to make sure it's sound on a legal and political level. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, and we very much applaud any initiative that helps us, achieve those goals.
Yep, it's not that we are competing, because we have common. Yeah.
Can we talk just a little bit about the complementarities between the two? So I think your proposal has fairly specific legal language for a lot of the things that I just referred to as basic corporate governance, that kind of thing. But there isn't anything in your proposal that is contradictory to what I just showed. Is that correct, or how?
Not at all. I think the objective is the same, right? Like we want to create a standard that works uniformly across Europe, which is why we're also pushing for this to be an EU regulation under Article 352. Because why would you create a version that has 27 versions of the same headache, rather than create medication or actually a remedy for the problem? So we're very much aligned. This needs to be a regulation. We don't want to touch national labor laws, taxation, insolvency. That doesn't make any sense. Every country in Europe has the right to do that. EU Inc. Or whatever it's called. Because I think we also both agree that 28th regime is kind of a silly name for it.
Let me interject for a second. The reason we do not use 28th regime is because eventually there will be a different number of member states in Europe, and we want whatever we build to be robust to that, so we cannot use 28 or 29 or 30. This is just all a bad idea. So we are going with 0 as a foundational, basic, universal number. EU Inc. is a fine name also, but anyway, it just cannot be 28. That makes
So
no
maybe
sense.
where we are a little bit different, but just a little bit, is because we focus even more on the innovative part
Yeah,
of
I was just going to say
here.
that.
And
In that
that's
sense, it narrows the scope quite a bit. We really want to ensure that this works for any company.
No. We also want to make clear that we are not really too much very specific on what we define as innovation. So it's really the innovative business plans that they would have. And it's not like you need to have a certain percentage of R&D or whatever, and then you would qualify. No. It's really, we look at a very broad definition of, but it would still be the innovative part of it that would really be important for incorporation here, so that we can also really design the regime for particularly those who really have this ambition and capacity to grow and need a European scale, and who's also attracted to the design of our system because it focuses on particularly their objectives here, which is what he very nicely illustrates.
Yeah, it makes total sense. There is a high-level forum from the Commission today on that very topic. Like how do we define innovation, how do we define startups, and how do we define scale-ups? In our very humble opinion, this is not something that should be done in Brussels.
I mean, the problem is, can you get something through as a law if you include all corporations in it? Will it just get blocked? So we are taking the position that that's quite a significant risk, and so is it better to get half a loaf rather than none, as the expression goes?
Yeah.
We will see with the proposal that's forthcoming from the Commission, from what we hear, is leaning towards making it for all companies and not just innovative companies. Is how do you define innovative? It's almost like saying we're going to provide electricity for the village, but also only to nice people. Like how do you, it's very subjective, right? How do you
Actually,
It's true,
we
but
can
you
do
should
that.
read a proposal to see it's not, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so after these very nice illustrations of why we need this and that we are very close to what the field actually is looking for, let's turn to the policy side here. And Amaryllis, floor is yours. Do you think this will actually work or not, given all your experience in how EU legislation formulation works?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Also for the presentation and the report, which I find extremely rich. Very good thought, food for thought, and certainly coming also at the right moment, because we're all in the Commission very much thinking about this proposal. Just to give you the overall context, so the 28 regime is going to be one proposal in a wider package in a way. You've seen probably earlier this year the single market strategy, also the start and scale up strategy. There is actually quite a number of initiatives underway in order to make the life of innovative businesses better. And the 28 regime should be actually seen in that context. And it's important to remember that because I think, we're still very much discussing what can we do where, through what kind of tools, etc. But, we should not only focus on one legislative initiative. You have to probably look at the full package that will come out. Now, I'd like to pick up on a number of the elements that you said, and because 5 points that I thought were very, very important. First, the aim of the 28 regime. It's not about just creating yet another company form. It is really about, why do we do this? Yeah, and that comes out very strongly in your proposal. It is because we want to give to companies that want to grow fast in the single market a real solution, overcoming fragmentation, getting access to finance, getting access to talents. And I think that that is a North Star. And you say that very well, and you illustrate it very well, and I hear it very much come from you. Like, always keep in mind, why do we do this? Second, you mentioned digitalization. Digitalization is something, indeed, where we need to double down, in my view. And there, by the way, the tools are there. We have already the single digital gateway. That's a regulation existing, and we're rolling it out. And one of the ideas that you presented, you know, the one-stop shop access to a hub with information on what are basically the relevant local and national rules applying, that is already contained in that regulation. Now we're rolling that out, and we hope to double down on this initiative in order to make that reality, because for everything, we need the cooperation of the member states. Yeah? And that's a question of political will and political priority. But that one-stop shop access to information is something very important, and we absolutely need to continue work on that. A third element that you bring, and I also heard it in what you said, the right to be treated as a local company without being forced to reincorporate just because you decide to do, or you explore certain activities in another member state, or you also want to get access to finance or a license. I mean, if you create a 28 regime company, that is because you want to navigate the single market, not because you want to stay in one member state. So for us, that is also an important aspect.
Yeah, non-discrimination.
And we see, actually, it's one of the terrible trends that we have identified in the single market. It is the fact that, you know, for simple activities such as opening a bank account in another member state, you know, you will have to set up a local presence, a subsidiary, what have you. This is something that doesn't work. It just adds red tape. The fourth element already mentioned, talent, that we hear also from investors, stock options, having a harmonized regime. And then the fifth element, and that really is close to the heart of anybody who works on the single market, maximum harmonization and making sure that there is uniform interpretation. And they're the two suggestions that you make, regulation, but also think about who will enforce this and how do we ensure that there is like uniform interpretation. So therefore, the idea of some kind of specialized courts is something that we're also exploring. I have to say, it's a very difficult one because we're touching on procedural autonomy. I'm not sure where we will be getting, but it is important that you, throughout the proposal, ensure that down the road, there will be uniform interpretation, in my view. So thank you very much for the contribution. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So indeed, this uniformity is a necessary element of the proposal here. So that's indeed something we take very seriously here. But also seeing actually the broader single market agenda here, but still we do see that Regime0 is a necessary element here. It needs complementarity here, but without this regime, all the others will also make it very hard to have effects here. Okay, but now, if we really are discussing whether this will go through or not, we also need the views from the broader economic and social committees here. So you have a very important task to do here.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this debate, and congratulations for the paper. Let me make a few comments about what I think it is very positive about the paper. In my view, it is important that the paper has a very narrow focus on scalers, is realistic, is smart politics, and it is smart economics. I like this approach of incorporate once and scale everywhere. This hub zero is a powerful idea. I like also very much the employee stock option, stock ownership plan, and the taxation at the end, at the sale stage. I like the approach of having a founder-friendly bankruptcy feature because it's important to have a second chance. And it is so much important that in countries like in Germany, failure is very much punished. So how can we claim, how can we aim to get into this entrepreneurial spirit, having such a potential penalty in front of you? So this is, in my view, very, very important. And definitely, I agree with the approach via regulation than via the directive. Otherwise, we risk to have 27 different 28 regimes. Now, some questions now. This innovation screening could be considered as an additional bureaucratic gate. I have a proposal there. And the proposal will be to make entry into the regime mostly automatic and having ex post audits. Yeah, like this. Thank you. So a sort of self-certification plus random ex post audits. Number two, the idea of having corporate taxes and labor remain national, well, it can be seen. I think that is politically the right approach, but it is not ideal, obviously, and we know that, and you know that. And somehow we have to navigate and to have the narrative to explain why this is not another bureaucratic hurdle. The transparency will be important there. And I think that the main challenge that I have is the one that somehow links the Regime0 to automatic, easier access to funding. It will not happen like this, in my view. It will bring clarity, transparency, certainty, lower compliance costs, lower expenditure in listings, and I don't know what else. But at the end of the day, the markets, the main hurdles to raise capital are due to the fact that in Europe, financial markets are fragmented. And supervisory, the supervisory approach is also is very divergent.
Yep.
So my proposal there is to apply what the states did in '96. They passed a law that is a very complicated name, which is the National Securities Markets Improvement Act. Securities law, in short. Before that, in the States, they used to have a fragmented capital markets. When a company needs to raise capital outside their founding member state or state, they have to comply with 50 different blue sky regimes, with different separate filings, inconsistent standards, high legal costs, uncertainty for the out-of-state investors. So what the United States did in '96 was not to force every state to abandon its rules. They created a federal outside option, which is this National Securities Markets Improvement Act. In that sense, later stage firms could raise capital under the federal regime and bypass state-by-state barriers, which is, I think, what we are needing in Europe.
We have no objection to such a great idea.
But I think that it should be something that we should be promoting and suggesting to the Commission to consider, because that will be a first step towards a capital markets union, and it will fit very well I was going to say very easily. No, perhaps it's not so easily, but it's going to be in the direction of the Savings and Investment Union.
Yeah. So all of the issues that you mentioned, we already discussed also at length when we were discussing the proposal here. We do agree that indeed Capital Markets Union would be very important complementary here, but we want to keep it out of this proposal here. It should be, but it is a very important complementary one here, but we don't want to mix it into the same one here. But we do also hope that our proposal will also make it easier for venture capital companies to be investing in these companies here, because for them, they no longer need to navigate the different regulations that we're told, depending on where your venture is actually incorporating here. So making that more easy and clear should also make it more attractive for venture capital companies.
Robin, could you weigh in on that point?
Yeah.
Just the flow of capital and which barriers are preventing what sort of growth?
From the venture capital perspective.
I mean, if you would go out and talk to any investor, seed VC, and any entrepreneur in any country in Europe and ask them if you ever raised money in another country, another EU member state, you would bump into different issues in different countries on different levels. And that's the crux of the problem, because fragmentation is the enemy of speed and scale, and that's what venture capitalists look for. I cannot tell you how many VCs in Europe advise actively startups that they invest in to incorporate as Delaware Inc. in the US. It's not because they don't love Europe, it's just they don't need all of that regulatory process and the admin. They don't need it, they don't want it, they want to go fast, right? Delaware Inc. offers a standard. So the question is now, like, if you would implement something like this in Europe, how do you make it better than a Delaware Inc.? Because if we have a 28 regime tomorrow, the venture capitalists can still advise their companies, set up in the UK, set up in the US, it's easier, it's affordable, we understand it, everybody understands it, so it's also good for co-investment. So how do you make it better, more modern, more future-proof?
Yeah. Okay, so now you want to reply?
I would like to ask you a question, because you are promoting this EU Inc. It is close to the Delaware concept in the States?
Yes.
It is.
Targeted to Europe, of course, because Europe
okay, but this is the same concept.
It's similar. It's essentially, look at it like every national regulation for incorporation, look at it as a foundational layer on top that works across the EU member states.
Yeah. So one of the other elements that you mentioned is, so we don't really have harmonization of like tax and labor laws, and ideally, maybe that's the direction we want to take, but that would be too far here. But we do also, that's why we really also call for transparency, so that at least companies know when they make their choices, what the cost and benefits are of each year. And we also do hope that transparency would then also lead to a kind of competition, and that would incite also the different member states. So if you want these type of companies, this is what you will have to do to attract them here. So hopefully the competition will work to, in the end, lead to a gradual better offers for these type of companies.
I think that the proposal is very powerful. It is an important brick on the wall. It will not be a single bullet. More things will be needed.
No, definitely.
But I think that it's better to be realistic and to start small and to grow than to be very ambitious and to achieve nothing. We say in Spanish that que mucho abarca poco aprieta. You will not understand it, but but the meaning is this. I mean, we have to be focused on what we do, and to be ambitious and doing well, starting small. And this is, in that sense,
starting targeted. That's what we mean with small.
Completely agree.
May I ask the group about labor law and unions and the role in the politics of the unions?
Yes.
Because that is something we have been told is tricky.
In our committee, I mean, in the Economic and Social Committee, we are in total 320, I think, Europeans. And a third come from the entrepreneurs side, like me. There is another third that represents trade unions, and there is a third that represents the diversified Europe, NGOs, consumers, and so on and so forth. We have had different debates internally about this proposal, this potential proposal, and our position as a committee there. And the first reaction from trade unions has been, without even discussing anything, just to oppose it. Just to oppose it. Again, in that sense, your proposal is very good, because when you aim at equity participation, it is, I mean, they cannot fear anything, because the number of holders is going to be very, very small. So, in my view, it's going to be difficult to change their position, because at the end of the day, they will consider themselves as being bypassed. And this sort of arbitrage, it is something that they don't like. Previous failures, as you have obviously analyzed, are due to precisely this, to the opposition of mainly German trade unions that are very powerful there and in Europe. But we have to deal with this, and this is a good way to do it, I think, because they cannot feel that they are really bypassed, because the number of they are not, exactly, they are not.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's although we could talk for a long time, I think it's really also time to let the floor also have. Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, I have to give my mic.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question for Fiona and a question for Mr. Schonbrot, if I pronounce it right. The question for Fiona is, we had recently a presentation here that said that the problem in Europe is not capital, is not regulation, but is labor laws when the firm fails, which happens very often, that innovative firms fail, and you have to pay an enormous amount of money for a long period of time to people that you dismiss. How do you deal in your proposal? If I can ask the question, Mr. Schonbrot, why did you write to ministers and not find private capital? What was the reason for your priority choice, so to say?
So should we first collect, or do you want to immediately answer? Maybe
okay, let's do two,
because there were
and
two.
I will forget them after.
Yes.
Thank you for the very nice conference here. I wanted to quickly ask, how would you go about defining the startups? You said it's relatively easy. I think there's some disagreement, but how do you do it precisely in this proposal?
Okay, yes, because that's also an important issue.
And what if a company that starts under that regime grows out of that definition? I'm not talking about exit via an acquisition, but just becomes just very big. And then on the last point that you were discussing about the reaction of trade unions, I think particularly in the German case, the representation of employees on the board is a very difficult discussion, where previous attempts to create something similar failed. How is that treated in your proposal? Because I think that's really a big stumbling block. And then sort of maybe an overarching question, does it make more sense to try this now and try to reach consensus amongst the 27 at the risk of having a relatively watered down legislation in a couple of years down the road? Or does it make more sense to go from the beginning or relatively early on, trying to target an ambitious coalition of the willing that is willing to implement this in a way that's potentially more impactful? Thank you.
Okay, that's a lot of questions, and now you.
Yeah, I will answer the two ones that I know how to do. So in terms of the employees, that if you fail, you need to let go or you need to reorganize. This, we hope, will occur because the firm, when it sets up, is able to look at the labor regulations across different member states and see which ones are favorable to their business model. If they're worried about failure, then this kind of inflexible labor law is not going to work. You might want to start in Denmark, for example. Alternatively, it might be that member states with inflexible labor laws want to say for Regime0 companies, for under a certain size, you have a special rule because we want to allow you to start and we appreciate there might be failure. So that's a quick answer. In terms of deciding whether something is innovative, it's really you could very easily make a list of sectors where it just happens by default. So biotech, pharma, defense, digital, health, green energy. These, if you're working in these spaces, you have to be innovative. That's it. And then after that, it's business plan. And are you, when you raise capital, you're giving a pitch deck to the people who are giving you capital. Or do you have a growth plan in there?
Yeah. So on the one hand, we really wanted to be targeted to innovative profiles, but we also want to avoid the administrative burden that it might actually create. And we thought very carefully about how to make it a light version that we don't care too much about false positives. We want to avoid. Yeah, now I have to.
The issue is that if you have every small cafe wanting to use Regime0 because it takes 3 days and costs only 500 euros, and their home member state takes 3 months and costs 3,000 euros, then perhaps there are too many businesses trying to get in, and this clogs it up. And again, we have to just be very careful about what political forces would be against the proposal. So that's why we limited it. I mean, in principle, everybody should be here. That's no objection to that. It's just the practicality.
Right, yeah. And if they become too large, that's actually what we want to have, because we want them to scale up here.
You don't grow out of it. You just stay.
Just
but then as you grow, maybe
there may be different regulations and the difference. Yeah. And on your coalition of the willing, rather than having all EU 27, we also thought about that here. Ideally, of course, we want to have the market as large as possible here, even beyond the 27 here. But we don't want to compromise on really essential things. If that's really the cost of having a uniform, then we will actually also prefer a coalition of the willing, but focused on the things that really are essential. Okay, there were lots of other questions. Okay,
maybe I'll answer
sure.
his question,
yes, right.
Because it's a very relevant question. Yeah. So venture capital. Very good. But the thing is, we are talking about innovation, and frankly speaking, our idea was bold and paradoxal. Okay. So long story short, probiotics, people know it as food supplements, but we don't do any food supplement. We put them on surfaces, on the skin. So basically, still today, people fear bacteria, but we embrace them and put them back there where they should go. And back then, when I was proposing this or talking to my father about it, who is a doctor, by the way, he said, yeah, it's a great idea, let's do it. But nobody was listening to us. And when I founded the company in the Netherlands, it's just because microbiologists from Eindhoven thought that this is a good idea. Anybody else was saying, no, focus on the gut microflora, yeah? Take pills, that's better. But Asians do that way better than us, or I hope not, but who knows. But then we said, okay, this is a very bold idea, okay? Work with bacteria instead against in the environment. And when we were doing this, and we said, okay, let's go to the ministries, they thought, okay, there is somebody coming with a risk project that is willing to create, let's say, jobs, and that will hire microbiologists on a new field that is completely new, and we can create IP, and we can do this is great. And for us, back then, what we did, we took money from the bank, of course, to finance, pre-finance, and then all eligible costs of R&D in our program would then be reimbursed by the National Fund of Luxembourg. This is how it was. And we as founders, we keep 100% of the stake, and we decide, and we continue. And lucky us, I mean, we are like this, we are both entrepreneurs, and we want to have a project that is long-term as well, And here we remain the decision makers. And here I come back to the people I employed. This is also very important. Nowadays, I would say the average age in my company is like 30, I would say. Huh? And everybody works for a purpose. And because we came with this bold idea, I don't have problems with, I don't know, labor or whatever. People are just working because of motivation. And indeed, we kept, let's say, the boat, and we are the captains of the boat.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay?
Yep, that's what we wanted to help. So we are a bit running out of time, and I want to just collect all the questions here all at once, and then we pick a span or whatever we want here.
Thanks. I want to ask a question about from the investment point of view. Let's say I'm an investor. I want to make an investment in young, innovative company in Europe, many of which, as you know, for the moment, are often bought up by American companies once they get to a certain scale. How will I know that my investment in this Regime0 company is going to be
better?
Well, I can't guarantee that it's going to have a return, obviously, but I want to make sure that I'm not getting in trouble with, I don't know, the Belgians or the Germans, because I'm based, my fund is based, let's say, in Luxembourg, but I want to invest in this Regime0 fund, which is pan-European.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, my question is about this proposal to differentiate innovative companies. What about business diversification? What if I'm a business that has an innovative, like most businesses, some parts that are very innovative and some parts that are super traditional? I think of a pharma company, they can make super innovative drugs, but they can also make paracetamol, which is not innovative, right? So do I have to break my company in two to apply for this regime?
Yeah, good question.
Hi, I have two short questions. The first one is on innovation. When I think about startups in Europe, I think about, I don't know, Bolt, Revolut, Spotify, Booking. They do not look super innovative to me, but they are consumer facing. So I think they will still benefit from this regime.
They're innovative in business models. And that's
yes, indeed, business models. And the second one is, what is the expected gain of your proposal? So do we have a counterfactual or something?
Yeah. Two more and then very close.
Thank you very much. Esther Davanzo from France Digital. I also have a question on the this idea of having the regime only for startups and only for companies that do not exist yet. How can you define a company, whether it is innovative or not, if it does not exist yet? And maybe asking Martin and also Robin, that is an entrepreneur, did you have a deck that was ready in day one? Like, I don't think it's easier to, demonstrate that you are a startup from the very beginning. And also, what if a company wants to burn German or Estonian, but then wants to scale in Europe? And this may also avoid having every cafe out there wanted to have the 28th regime just in case, because if it is only for companies that do not exist yet, then you may just want to have it just in case,
Yeah, we discussed all these issues. One last one, and then we can also continue the discussion afterwards.
Yes. One of the questions is, I think, to what extent you can incorporate in Regime0 at later stages, because incorporating at day one is quite easy. At least in this country, you get that in a couple of hours. I mean, it's reasonably easy, and I think getting a bank account is reasonably easy as well. Once you raise more money, you have huge due diligence, and basically there people want to know, what is the corporate law, what is the corporate governance law, and bankruptcy law, and that becomes a much more tidy exercise. And the question is, whether, and that's also if you read Draghi and others, this is where the problem lies. So, when you are Belgian, for instance, and you try to raise several tens of millions, basically you need to get more professional people involved. And that means that you reach a different scale. And this is, I think, the moment where this Regime0 would be very important, and a little bit, like the Delaware Inc., basically, they create something in Delaware sometimes at later stages. And so basically the question is, to what extent you would be able to incorporate in Regime0 at a moment where size becomes to matter.
Right, yeah. Fiona, you want, because we discussed a lot this reincorporation, right? So I'm going to give...
Yes, it's interesting to me. We have been working on this for some time, and the idea that a person cannot identify innovation when they see it seems to be widespread in European society. And I find that to be puzzling. I mean, if you make an innovative drug, you're innovative, you're the startup. You don't have a startup making paracetamol. That's not a thing. No one will invest in that because the return is nothing. So you would make a startup because you do an innovative drug. If later you want to make paracetamol, there's no rule against that. But I think you could have the proposal be open to everybody, and they already exist, and they can do anything they want. But your problem is you will get nothing. And Europe has nothing right now. So I am tired of nothing, and I would like to have something. And I think that if it is imperfectly filtering innovative companies, so be it. Then we have half a loaf. We don't have nothing. And if we have in the legislation, if you do biotech, you do pharma, you do energy, you do defense, you do digital, by definition you are innovative, how badly off are we going to be in terms of who is in this regime? I just don't see why the perfect needs to be the enemy of the good. Yes, there will be a few mistakes. Oh well. They will just have to do what they do now, those 6 firms. The other 1,000 of them will be much better off. So that's my position, sorry.
Yeah. So we really wanted to avoid that there would be indeed too much, I forgot the name of the word. Sweat. So it's not only about identifying innovative firms from the start, but also we have designed it that actually it only offers particular advantages for innovative firms here, and that's why regulatory arbitrage is something we actually also want to avoid by the design of the product. It's arbitrage word I was looking for here. Yeah, sorry, we're running out of time here, but I want to give everybody a last word here to say you can respond to any of the questions or just raise any of the issues that you really want to make to close the discussion here, but which will never be closed. We have to continue anyway. So, yeah.
Just a word on your question regarding basically who is the gatekeeper in this gaming if you want to invest in one of these companies, in one of these Regime0 companies. If we follow the example of the States, the SEC, in this case in Europe, will be the ESMA. ESMA will be the gatekeeper of the European covered bonds, so to speak. And the domestic national authorities will be in charge of anti-money laundering and anti-fraud. That's it. Yep. Thank you.
Right, okay, so your last thoughts.
So there were a lot of questions about this definition of innovative, so I'll focus on that if that's okay. And we give the example of the local cafe, right, which I think is great, because if you're a local cafe in, let's say, Portugal, you could theoretically register for Regime0 or EU Inc. and still be a Portuguese company. The likelihood of you expanding to other countries and raising investment from venture capitalists are quite slim. I will say though, in Silicon Valley, I know investment firms who have made more money investing in Blue Bottle Coffee, which is a local cafe that exited for $200 million by expanding across the US. So I wouldn't discount the fact that sometimes innovative companies don't seem innovative from the start.
Exactly.
That's the crux of the problem, right? Nobody here can define innovation. Nobody in this room, not me, not you, because you say Boulder or Pluto, these innovative companies, up to whoever looks at it, right? Like you cannot really boil it down into measurable things. Of course you want to avoid the corporate, pretending to be 5 startups in a trench coat. You have to have checks and balances there, and there will be a time where startups stop being a startup, and then what happens? Are you no longer eligible? Do you lose your benefits? Do you lose your advantages? So you avoid that by making it possible for all, making it useful for the ones that actually will use it.
Yep, this is the design of the advantages that you would give them. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I will keep it short. I would say, as an entrepreneur, keep it simple and let's have fun. Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurs are there to innovate or to put something new on the market. I have fun every day. I have a lot of passion, and I think that we need to keep it like that and take bureaucracy out of our plates.
Thank you. Yeah. We also like to have fun in helping you in this. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're having fun with this proposal every day. Just to come back on the question of the eligibility criteria that you raised, innovation, etc., I would tend to agree that it's probably difficult to define. It's true that somehow you see innovation when, but maybe that's not. I mean, if this is combined with any screening, it might be difficult in practice to manage it. However, you also mentioned that you want to actually look at, your grow capacity. And that's maybe an easier criterion to use. And we've actually used it in a similar proposal that, for some other reasons, is not going through very well right now. But basically there we said, like, okay, we want to create a statute for a cross-border association. Yeah, we said cross-border. Yeah. So, and that is also something that you can see through the corporate intent. Is my intent to be like the local bakery shop, or do I basically want to win over the European market and probably the universe? Yeah? Because at the end of the day, you are dealing with a problem of fragmented markets. And that's why the cross-border element could be also something
it's a
like
very
a
good
qualifier.
point. So we thought of its innovation to also scale up. For instance, that's why we thought of like a European unitary patent, because that already also gives you ambition. You want to exploit your IP across markets. Okay, so I have to close it here because we're really way out of time, but we had fun. And we will be able to continue the discussion outside here and also beyond this here, because I think this will be a continuing discussion that we would need here. And I think we already have here a good panel that identified why, which is important always as an element to keep into account on the house, and whether we work is why we are doing this here. That's why I want to thank all the panel members here for contributing to that story. Thank you. And please read the policy brief here, because there are lots of details that are in there that we were not able to discuss.